Sometimes what goes up must come down. Hundreds of thousands of unwanted buildings are demolished every year.
There she blows!
The vast majority go off without a hitch. But sometimes man-made disasters strike, devastating homes and properties, causing serious injury, and even death. Most demolitions are successful, thanks to months of planning by highly skilled experts. Despite appearances, buildings are not blown up. Instead, a series of small, coordinated explosions are used to weaken the structure, and gravity does the rest. Exclusion zones keep spectators and other structures safe, and the whole building comes down in seconds. But things don't always go according to plan. The excitement of a demolition can be an appealing spectacle to adults and children alike. So when things go wrong, it can put the lives of anyone nearby directly in the line of danger. On Wednesday, November 10th, 2010, in Ohio, crowds gathered to watch a 275-foot-high tower being demolished. The 83-year-old smokestack was part of an old power plant that had been retired. Spectators, including young children, looked on as the explosives blew. But very quickly, it became clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The tower fell the opposite way than it was supposed to, smashing into two huge generators and live power lines, causing huge sparks to fly. 12,500 volts were unleashed as the out-of-control power lines began whipping around, forcing the terrified onlookers to literally flee for their lives. Demolition expert Terry Quarmby thinks hidden flaws in the structure may have contributed to the extraordinary chain of events.
Once you've detonated it and you've given it a shock, any areas of weakness within that structure would be affected. And if those areas of weakness were in the opposite direction to where the intended fall was, then it will twist that structure. It will always collapse into the weakest side. Pre-weakening could have happened in that structure over that 83 years quite easily.
A long-running legal dispute about who would foot the bill for the repairs was eventually settled out of court. In this instance, it was extremely lucky no one was killed. On Sunday, April 24th, 2016, local residents in Seaforth, Liverpool, gathered to watch two huge high-rises being demolished. Montgomery House and Churchill House, two tower blocks built in the 60s, stood almost 165 feet tall and contained 116 apartments between them. Reginald Scriven lived in one.
I lived in Churchill House. I was on the 12th floor there. Beautiful. 2-bedroom, magic. Got a landmark to everyone. Even when you're coming home from Benidorm in the plane or anything like that, you know, you can see them.
But by 2016, the tower blocks had fallen into disrepair. Residents were rehoused, and the order was given to demolish them. Explosives were placed all around each building. The plan was to blow them both up at the same time. Hoping to witness the spectacular event for themselves, locals gathered in droves, including resident Tracy Williams.
I'd lived around here all my life. My sons went to school and nursery in this area. It was just, I was curious to see, you know, they've been part of my life for such a long time. You know, I just wanted to be there when they come down. I wanted to be able to say, yeah, I was there.
It almost felt like a day out, to be honest, for some people, which is quite funny, and that's fine.
Andrew Heaton lived in a house right next door to one of the tower blocks.
The residents got moved to the community centre. There was, I would say, a couple of hundred people. Just sort of nothing to do on a Sunday afternoon, to come see a building full of, because it's not often you see that kind of thing anyway, is it? And I know loads of people had live streams and webcams up.
What is happening with the building?
Jake Curitan was live streaming from his cell phone.
I'm just literally taking you up the road here to where I first started filming the demolition. It's where all the magic happened.
Where's the big bad wolf when you need him?
So I parked up here, and then I just basically got my phone out and I just started recording the building straight onto social media. Obviously, I didn't know how many people were going to tune in, but it transpired there was 230,000 people.
Hundreds of thousands of people were watching all over the world, hoping to witness the spectacle. Expectations were running high. The two 15-story buildings were primed with powerful explosives. Then, at just after 11 a.m., the first blast rang out. Incredibly, the tower blocks didn't budge.
No, it stopped. It's bloody stopped.
Oh, does not look right, that.
It's not good, this, is it?
I had a feeling it might do that.
Then you could smell the gunpowder and everyone was just quiet, and the next thing people were whispering, when this supposed to have come down now? And we're all, don't know. Next thing everyone's saying, it's a flop, it's a fail, it's a fail.
What's happening with it? I don't even think they're going to blow it again.
Suddenly, and without warning, one of the towers collapsed.
All the cameras and everything were all zoomed on Monty over there. And then it was Churchy that come down. It did take everyone by surprise.
Churchill House has collapsed.
Explosives had detonated on both buildings. After an unexpected delay, Churchill House came crashing down. The hundreds of spectators who gathered were covered in dust. This was to be expected from an explosion this size, but still created confusion. And many in the crowd were caught off guard, including Tracy.
People were just running around, running into houses, running into the shops, running into cars, screaming, running this way, that way, and bumping into each other. You couldn't even see the person in front of you.
What's more, it's not clear why there had been a delay or what was going to happen next to Montgomery House. And when demolitions don't go as planned, the people in charge go into crisis mode. Residents like Andy, who lived close to the demolition site, had been temporarily evacuated from their homes and put into hotels. He watched the drama unfold on live stream.
All these walkie-talkies started exploding and people started running around. It was almost out of body.
Despite the delay between detonation and collapse, Churchill House had been successfully demolished. But confusion remained about what was going to happen to Montgomery House, which was still standing.
Then the other one just didn't come down. It just didn't want to come down.
You just presume if one of them's come down, given that they were supposed to be identical buildings, it would only be a matter of minutes, maybe an hour or two before the other one come down.
With questions still remaining about what had gone wrong, the decision was made to try another demolition the following day. This time, wire ropes were tied around the building in an attempt to pull the structure down. But then this happened.
Next minute, all you heard was this crack, crack. I can't describe that noise. It was horrendous. It was horrible. We thought someone's house was going to get crushed.
Jake had returned to live stream the aftermath of the failed demolition.
Genuinely was sitting here going, oh my God, what is that noise? And then all you saw was part of the building just fall off the side of it and drop down on the floor.
Oh, no way! What a disaster!
We lost half the building.
Say goodbye to that back garden.
We lost half the building, though.
We were like, oh my God, we thought it actually hit someone's back garden. It crushed someone's complete entire back garden.
Montgomery House had only partially collapsed, but now there was a new problem. Some of the debris had smashed into people's backyards, including Andy, who watched helplessly from his hotel room as the whole thing unfolded.
I was watching the live stream of the tower, and I was just having a laugh and a joke with one of my colleagues. Go, look, that's my garden. That. And as I was saying that, I saw live the whole tower collapse, and it almost didn't seem real.
But mystery still remained about exactly what was stopping the huge high-rise from collapsing.
Almost time for me to go.
Well, what if I...
Drove me home?
What if we lost track of time?
What if we took a leap of faith?
What if you...
Missed my flight next week?
The all-new RAV4. Toyota. Let's go places.
The hottest sneakers. Impossible to get. Until now. Every pair. Every grail. Always available. Always authentic. Never sold out. Millions know. Now you do too. StockX. Now you know. Visit StockX.com today.
Hey, does this suit look okay to you?
Yeah.
It doesn't look too...
Baggy? No, it's not baggy. Let's just, Perfect. You look great. Right, Glenn?
It's good.
Suits that actually fit for you and your crew. Rent from thebblacktux.com.
Not sure you have the right credit card? Know which one to get? Turn to the nerds. Hey there, aloha. Need a card with great travel rewards? Turn to the nerds. Yowza, that sounded expensive. Time for a credit card with a lower interest rate? Turn to the nerds. Can we crack a window or something? The experts at NerdWallet make it easy to make smart money moves. Compare and find the best credit cards for you at nerdwallet.com. Not getting enough cash back with that credit card? Turn to the nerds. Are your credit cards working hard enough for you? At NerdWallet, we sort through hundreds of credit cards to find you the lowest rates and the sweetest perks like balance transfers and travel. Using your preferences to narrow your search, NerdWallet makes it easy to compare and find the perfect card for you. Need the right credit card? Turn to the nerds at nerdwallet.com.
The demolition of two stubborn 1960s tower blocks was turning into an explosive expert's worst nightmare.
It was all a bit mad. It's like something out of some mad Hollywood movie on a really cheap budget.
After an unexpected delay, explosives brought down the first one.
Churchill just come down. There was just like a rumble, and next thing, the concrete dust was everywhere.
But so far, the second, Montgomery House, had resisted two separate attempts at demolition.
We were convinced it was going to fall down. We were convinced that it was going to go, and it didn't.
The second had resulted in only a partial collapse.
Oh, no way. Say goodbye to that back garden.
But even worse, the rubble had unexpectedly smashed into nearby residents' yards, including Andy's. Fortunately, at the time of the explosion, he'd been temporarily rehoused in a hotel.
It was quite shocking. Literally the whole garden was covered in rubble, completely destroyed. There was debris literally up to the patio door. And then to have one of the main support columns lying in your garden, I'd be literally just there. The fence, as you can see, it's been put back up. That was completely destroyed. The whole brick wall's gone. Just absolute chaos. It didn't even feel like our house. It felt like a bomb site, if you will.
But why had the demolition so disastrously failed? A health and safety executive investigation later discovered that steel pipes filled with concrete were hidden in columns around the exterior of the tower, preventing it from fully collapsing. These pipes had not appeared on any pre-construction drawings or paperwork, and so the demolition company had no idea they were there. Jake had been live streaming from the demolition site to an audience of hundreds of thousands across the world.
We knew something was amiss. Like,
what's happening with it now? It could go at any minute.
That's when they stopped and thought, we're going to have to do something else here.
This giant problem needed a giant solution.
And that's when they decided to get the crane in.
A super high-reach excavator was brought to Seaforth from Scotland. Nicknamed the Glasgow Pulverizer by local press, it was the tallest machine in Europe, weighing over 240 tons and reaching 220 feet in height, making it taller than the 15-story block itself. The tower would have to be taken apart piece by piece.
It was just crazy. It must have lasted just over a week by the time they took that last piece of Montgomery away.
Eventually, the second tower disappeared from Liverpool's skyline forever, leaving some of the local residents with mixed emotions.
To see everyone come together was great, and it was amazing. As for now, it's just an old building that's now not there anymore. Very sad, yeah. Yeah, it was very sad.
That green space over there is where Churchill used to be. It's just a grass area now.
2 years on, the house still isn't what it is. We've still got gouge marks in the fence. To come out and see at least 2 or 3 ton of rubble in the back garden, that nightmare was frightening.
I knew a few people who lived in a couple of those buildings, and they're sad to see it go, you know. And plus, the window cleaner's lost punt, hasn't he? So.
But it will be a week the residents of Seaforth will remember for the rest of their lives.
Oh, no way! Say goodbye to that back garden.
It's not just the demolition of high-rises that creates impressive, crowd-drawing spectacles. Huge disused stadiums ready to be destroyed also bring in throngs of eager onlookers. In the city of Pontiac, Michigan, in December 2017, locals gathered to witness the demolition of an abandoned monster-sized stadium.
Everything has its time. We had its memories, it served its purpose, but now we'd like to see it go on to the next step.
The building had become a huge, decrepit ruin. But this was a far cry from its glory days. Opened in 1975, the 80,000-seater stadium was considered one of the finest in the world. Its spectacular fiberglass roof earned it the nickname, the Pontiac Silverdome. Major sporting events and world-famous acts attracted international audiences. Pontiac Mayor Deirdre Waterman recalls its legacy.
It put Pontiac on the map. People all over the world, you just said the Silverdome, and they knew exactly where I was from.
The stadium was also a monument for local residents, such as Steve and Kim Derecki.
Every major concert was performed here, from The Who to the Rolling Stones to Bruce Springsteen.
Plus, we had the Pope John Paul here in 1987. They turned the Silverdome into a chapel. That was amazing.
Every event you can imagine in a big arena was at the Pontiac Silverdome.
Business boomed in the Silverdome's heyday throughout the 80s and 90s, but then things started to go very wrong. There were 2 dangerous and costly roof collapses. Major acts and sporting events started going elsewhere, and by 2014, the abandoned stadium was in ruins. But Mayor Waterman saw the potential for a rebirth.
This is prime property, about 127 acres. To have unused vacant land at the confluence of the major highways and right in the center of a prosperous county, this is very highly sought after territory right now.
The date was set for December 3rd, 2017. Charges were laid around the entire 127-acre building, along with a total of 300 pounds of dynamite. This strategy was carefully planned, and it should have had a very specific outcome.
The major ring around the top of the Silverdome that supported the roof beams was to come down, and it was to drop. And that's what we were expecting to see.
But this superstructure wasn't going down without a fight.
I, see the flashes go off. A split second later, you start hearing the kabooms.
I said, uh-oh, something's wrong here.
We'd love some help with laundry. Here's how you do it. Spray and scrub anything with a stain. Soak your nasty jersey, it stinks. Wash the really dirty clothes separately. Remember, hard work builds character.
New Tide Pods with upgraded 4-in-1 technology unleash a foolproof clean in one step.
Oh, you did the laundry.
But you didn't fold it.
Oh, that wasn't in the note. You should have sent a text.
#1 stain and odor fighting power. #1 trusted. It's got to be Tide.
You've got to get in there.
I know what a bath is.
Smile, honey.
This thing is like...
First kid.
Ready.
Here we go.
By their second kid, every parent is an expert and more likely to choose Loves than first-time parents. Live, learn, and get Loves.
Almost time for me to go.
Well, what if I...
Drove me home?
What if we lost track of time?
What if we took a leap of faith?
What if you...
Missed my flight next week?
The all-new RAV4. Toyota, let's go places.
When your blanket's freshness fades before the binge watching begins, that's when you know it's half washed. Next time, add Downy fabric conditioner for up to 7 days of Downy freshness. Downy, and it's done.
Two archaeologists explore America's oldest mystery.
The Vikings traveled from Europe thousands of miles to get here. The big question is, how far did they go?
America's Lost Vikings, all new Sunday at 10 on Science.
The Pontiac Silverdome was a piece of Michigan history, but when it was condemned, a plan was made to demolish it. The building was cleared and the explosives laid. Spectators gathered, but they didn't get the show they were expecting.
The major ring around the top of the Silverdome that supported the roof beams was to come down, and it was to drop. And that's what we were expecting to see. We were all here, and they did the countdown.
And we heard boom.
The blast went off, poop, 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 all around.
I, see the flashes go off. A split second later, you start hearing the kabooms.
Seen a little flash and seen a little smoke, and then it was like, what happened?
Nothing happened. And we waited, and nothing happened. And we waited, and nothing happened.
And then the smoke disappears, and the whole upper ring was still standing.
I heard people saying, oh, U.S. Steel, yes, U.S. Steel. Silverdome doesn't want to go down. It wants to stay right where it's at.
I happened to be standing across from the president of the demolition company, and I noticed he looked a little green around the gills. And I said, uh-oh, something's wrong here.
The stadium had survived a huge detonation that should have brought it crashing down. So what kept this concrete beast standing? A demolition that's only partially successful is not just disappointing to observers, it's incredibly dangerous. It leaves the remaining structure destabilized, and it means the building behaves unpredictably. When attempts are made to blow up multiple buildings at once, there's a higher chance that something could go wrong. In Glasgow, Scotland, the planned demolition of 6 iconic tower blocks known as the Red Road Flats had drawn a crowd of onlookers.
And the crowds are gathering in.
Built in the 1960s to help alleviate Glasgow's housing problems, at the time, they were the tallest residential structures in Europe. Finlay McKay was one of the very first residents.
I moved in from birth. It was my first home. That would have been 1968. If you went up to the roof space, you could see for miles and miles. I could see the entire city and towns beyond. The view was incredible.
Another early resident was Frances Smith.
Just on the one landing that I stayed on, there was 17 children. It was amazing because you always had friends. In fact, still best friends to this day. But as a young child, we thought it was amazing. But that was back in the 1960s.
But by the 1970s, the high-rises had become run down and were associated with drugs and crime. The decision was made to rehouse the residents and demolish the apartments. Neil Hewitt and his son Jamie were amongst the thrill-seekers hoping to witness a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle.
Well, I think all boys like big explosions and, football, that would just bore me to tears. But, a demolition, that's entertainment.
Yeah, definitely.
Some, such as local resident Lindsay Kahn, had come to say goodbye to a familiar sight.
It'd been in the skyline for my whole life. My dad had grown up just streets away from it, saw it being built as a kid. His older brother had worked on it.
A total of 903 homes across 6 blocks were due to be demolished in what was estimated to be a $23 million contract. At 10 a.m. on Sunday, October 11th, 2015, crowds started to gather. Many, such as Pep and Zoat, had cameras at the ready.
I was standing here with my camera. I think I stuck it through the bars of this gate, waiting for it to happen. I can remember a bit of muscle pain in my right arm from keeping the camera as still as possible.
Then, at just after 3 p.m., the warning siren rang out.
Kaboom, and the whole lot just came tumbling down.
You can actually see this shudder going through the camera when the explosion went off. It was such a violent experience.
The building started to come down in what seemed like slow motion.
The dust from it was just amazing, and how quickly it travelled through the air.
We were trying to outrun the dust clouds. But obviously you can't outrun a dust cloud, so we were completely covered. The dust was that thick that I could hardly see the person walking in front of me.
Once people had kind of settled a wee bit, and then that's when people could see that part of the flat was still standing.
Once the dust settled, it looked like something had gone wrong.
Two of them, they only came down halfway. They were sticking out of the... There was big clouds of dust and they were sticking out of the dust, and people were wondering if it's meant to do that.
2 of the 6 towers had failed to be demolished as expected. And much like the demolition of the Silverdome, the iconic Glasgow towers proved more difficult to dismantle than expected.
Almost time for me to go.
Well, what if I...
Drove me home?
What if we lost track of time?
What if we took a leap of faith?
What if you...
Missed my flight next week?
The all-new RAV4. Toyota. Let's go places.
2 archaeologists explore America's oldest mystery.
The Vikings traveled from Europe thousands of miles to get here. The big question is, how far did they go?
America's Lost Vikings, all new Sunday at 10 on Science.
Terrain is tough here.
Expectations are high. We're actually getting access to things that have never been seen before.
I don't know of any other frozen specimen like this.
It is a bit like science fiction.
It's like nothing I've ever seen in my life.
Lost Beasts of the Ice Age, all new 2-hour special, Sunday at 8 on Science.
When onlookers saw 2 of the beloved Glasgow Red Road flats remained partially standing after a spectacular series of explosions, they thought something had gone wrong.
People were wondering if it's meant to do that.
Unknown to some of the spectators, the demolition company had anticipated that 8 to 10 stories of the 2 buildings would remain standing for dismantling afterwards. But instead, one was left with 11 stories and the other 13. But some people still managed to see the humor in the situation.
That became a tourist attraction, people coming up and videoing and taking pictures of holding it up at the sides. The way the building fell, you could kind of stand away back from it and do the old Leaning Tower of Pisa where you would just look as if you were holding it up.
Immediately they were known as the Leaning Towers of Springburn, and there was jokes all over social media.
The tower blocks were proving to be as resilient as the residents themselves.
These are Glasgow towers, you know. You're not going to knock them down so easily. These are really tough towers.
After a check by the demolition firm, the remaining blocks were deemed safe enough that residents who had been evacuated from nearby homes could now return. Specialized high-reach equipment was brought in to take apart the remains of the tower blocks piece by piece.
So many people's lives were lived in those flats, so many happy occasions, so many sad occasions, and all that was left now was just a pile of rubble. So that was quite sad.
It took another 2 years to clear the area completely, leaving some with mixed feelings.
That was quite an emotional thing, my flat coming down, because that's my childhood home. You stayed with your mum and dad and your brother and your pals, and you were a kid, you didn't have any worries, so I found it quite emotional.
A part of my family a part of my childhood. That had all gone now. When you think back to like my mum and dad, my grandmother stayed in them, I had aunties, I had cousins. So it was with a hint of sadness, but I appreciate why they had to come down.
An iconic part of Glasgow's skyline for more than half a century, the Red Road high-rises are gone but not forgotten. In the city of Pontiac, Michigan, the similarly beloved but now dangerously decrepit Silverdome Stadium was resisting its own destruction. Local residents Steve and Kim Durecki were watching the demolition.
Then we heard ba-boom. And seen some smoke, and that was it. It doesn't want to come down. You know, the Silverdome wants to stay. You know, it's part of Pontiac. It's part of history here.
But what had gone wrong? The demolition company discovered that about 10% of the charges had failed to detonate. But what had stopped the charges from going off? At the time, the demolition company said that one of the reasons may have been trespassers damaging them the previous night. The plan was to make a second attempt the following day. Charges were again placed all around the stadium. Then, a series of huge detonations rocked Pontiac.
Whatever it was, they did it right because that sucker came down. It was great.
This was a demolition that was meant to take this down.
It was amazing. The earth shook. I have friends that were 10, 15 miles away that were like, what is that? You know, we felt this, heard, you know, this loud boom. Must have been the Silverdome. I mean, this monster just came tumbling down, and you've seen all the dirt and the smoke and everything go up in a big, like an atomic bomb type, you know, it went down so fast. It was incredible. I remember my heart just racing with excitement.
The successful demolition means it's the end of an era for Pontiac. But Mayor Waterman hopes it also represents the start of a new chapter.
We were actually a little sad that this time it worked because that meant we had really lost the Silverdome after its last valiant attempt to fight back against time. You know, one of the things as mayor is a vision of what could be. So I've got all kinds of visions of what could be on this site. And I think that's going to be just as exciting as the Silverdome here, but I'm hoping for bigger and better things.
Because as much as demolition represents a massive ending, it also signals new beginnings. In Vordingborg, Denmark, for example, developers were planning major improvements to the town's waterfront. Only one thing stood in their way: an almost 175-foot-tall decommissioned silo, once used for storing cement. Local resident Jesper Sandberg recalls some of the original plans.
Some people have an idea to take the silo and make a hotel, but the construction was not good enough, so they decided to bring it down and build a new building with hotels and shops and apartments.
But not everyone was keen on the idea of demolishing such an iconic landmark, such as Eva Soma, who worked in the cultural center right next to the silo.
Well, I sort of liked the old silo because it was a big thing for this city. Has been here for 36 years.
6 months of planning had gone into the demolition of the silo, and over 23 pounds of explosives were placed around it. In order to avoid damaging the neighboring cultural center, demolition boss Kenneth Wegg made some alterations to the structure.
Planen var, at vi har lavet et forhug i siloen. Vi har 4 ben stående tilbage, som vi skal bortspring med sprængstof for at få den til at vælte.
Despite this careful preparation and the demolition team's best efforts, Vordingborg wouldn't reclaim the land under this silo without paying the price.
It is a bit like science fiction. Lost Beasts of the Ice Age. All new 2-hour special. Sunday at 8 on Science.
Almost time for me to go.
Well, what if I...
Drove me home?
What if we lost track of time?
What if we took a leap of faith?
What if you...
Missed my flight next week?
The all-new RAV4. Toyota, let's go places.
2 archaeologists explore America's oldest mystery.
The Vikings traveled from Europe thousands of miles to get here. The big question is, how far did they go?
America's Lost Vikings. All new Sunday at 10 on Science.
The people of Vordingborg, Denmark looked forward to a bright future with a promising new development along the waterfront. But before they could explore the area's potential, they needed to take down a historic but decrepit silo. April 5th, 2018 was the day of the demolition. Thousands of people had gathered to witness the explosion, including Jesper Sandberg, who was recording the events on camera.
We were down here, actually at this spot with 4 cameras. And then I was here with the drone and have parked the drone in the air and just waiting for the Big Bang.
A large area of land to the right of the tower had been cleared for it to collapse safely onto. Demolition boss Kenneth Wegg was feeling confident.
Vi havde helt ro med den, at det skulle gå. Det gik som det skulle.
Then the order was given to detonate the silo's explosives.
Nej.
The Big Bang come, and suddenly I think it doesn't seem right. It has to go to the right side and it goes down, and then slowly to the left. Then suddenly I woke up and said, oh, now we are not making a small story for the end of the news, now we're making big news.
Og jeg kan huske, selvfølgelig følger jeg den hele vejen ned, men jeg kan også huske, min verden den lukker lidt ned der. Man går lidt i stå, fordi det kan jo ikke ske.
Along with Kenneth and his shocked demolition team, thousands of onlookers could only watch in horror as the silo fell the wrong way, smashing into the cultural center right next door.
Det første, der går igennem hovedet, det er selvfølgelig, om der er personskade.
As the dust settled, they had no idea if anyone had been harmed. But Kenneth and his team aren't the first to be stumped by a stubborn silo that refuses to come down as expected. May 12, 2013, Brisbane, Australia. Crowds gathered to watch a huge 4,400-ton silo being demolished. The 50-year-old silo had originally been used to store malt for brewing beer. Demolition expert Terry Quarmby knows the difficulties of demolishing such a large building.
They're heavily reinforced, probably upwards of 40 to 50 meters in height. To take that kind of structure down, you're going to be using a fair amount of controlled explosive charge.
Spectators looked on as 220 pounds of explosives were detonated. But suddenly, the silo stalled, teetering at a precarious angle.
It's the stuff of nightmares. And the unknown factors, of course, are how long is it going to stay up? Will it fall over on its own accord? That's the worst scenario.
The explosives had detonated, but failed to destroy part of the rear framework, which caused the silo to be held up. Powerful demolition equipment was brought in to remove the remaining parts of the structure. The 50-year-old silo finally came crashing down.
It's obviously a surprise, isn't it, for everybody when something doesn't go right. And in these instances, something not going right is the building still standing when you fully expected it to end up on the deck.
Years before Columbus, the Vikings landed in America. Archaeologist Mike Arbuthnot and Blue Nelson will use the latest tech.
You are experiencing a Viking winter.
To test America's oldest mystery.
The big question is, how far did they go?
The New World wasn't new.
This could change American history as we know it.
America's Lost Vikings, all new Sunday at 10 on Science.
Terrain is tough here.
Expectations are high.
We're actually getting access to things that have never been seen before.
I don't know of any other frozen specimen like this.
It is a bit like science fiction.
It's like nothing I've ever seen in my life.
Lost Beasts of the Ice Age, all new 2-hour special, Sunday at 8 on Science.
Almost time for me to go.
Well, what if I...
Drove me home?
What if we lost track of time?
What if we took a leap of faith?
What if you...
Missed my flight next week?
The all-new RAV4. Toyota, let's go places.
In the Danish harbor town of Vordingborg, an almost 175-foot-tall abandoned silo due for demolition had collapsed in the wrong direction, smashing into the town's cultural center. Kenneth Wegg, head of the demolition project, was immediately concerned about potential casualties.
Det første, der går igennem hovedet, det er selvfølgelig, om der er personskade.
Luckily, the cultural center was in the exclusion zone, which meant it had been evacuated at the time of the disaster. A security guard gave Kenneth the good news.
Og da jeg hører ham fortælle, at alt er ok, så kan jeg huske, så slapper jeg af.
Despite the dramatic failure of the demolition, the internal structure of the cultural center had remained largely undamaged. But the offices had been devastated by the force of the collapse. Eva Soma watched helplessly as the tower smashed into the office where she worked.
It ended up wending into my office. So we took our bikes and came down here, and everybody was shocked. It was so sad.
The head of the cultural center, Eric, was faced with a huge cleanup operation.
It took 30 people, 3.5 days, working 24 hours a day, to clean everything up because there was a lot of glass, shattered glass, and and dust. Of course, it's not a nice feeling to see that.
But incredibly, much of the damage was caused not by falling concrete, but by air pressure. Professor Per Golterman explains.
If you move a hand close to your face, you can feel the wind. Then imagine it's a large silo coming down and hitting the ground. Just when it hits the ground, then it pushes the air out, and that can be what hits you. So yeah, it can damage the building without actually hitting them. We know wind can be a problem. I mean, this is why hurricanes tumble houses. There can be a lot of power in the wind.
You can actually see here where the silo went down. It went down and landed about 3 to 4 meters outside the cultural center, but the air pressure blew the walls in.
Eric estimates it will take 6 months and around $700,000 to fully repair the building. But for project boss Kenneth Wegg, mystery still remains over the precise cause of the botched demolition.
Nej, jeg har selvfølgelig, altså min baggrund gør, at jeg kan ikke fortælle, hvad der er gået galt. Jeg har selvfølgelig en teori om, at betonen ikke har været den beskaffenhed, som vi forventede, at den var, og som tegningerne sagde. Der har også måske været nogle armeringsforhold, som ikke har været på plads. Det er nok det nærmeste, jeg kan komme. Og jeg tror, sagen den vil havne der på den hylde, hvor man ligesom siger, det er gået galt, men vi har lært noget af det. Men lige nøjagtigt, hvad der er gået galt, det tror jeg aldrig, vi får 100% svar på.
They are the giants of the sea. Jet engines make this the fastest passenger ship in the world.